morning.
Good morning.
What a different day it is from yesterday. My gosh. This morning I'm going to be talking about the future, your divine destiny. Buddha once said something very beautiful. He said, all that we are is the result of what we have thought. All that we are is founded on our thoughts and formed by our thoughts. If you were here yesterday, you'll see the repetition. You know, in the Ageless Wisdom teaching, what it says about our thoughts and how our thoughts and actions and feelings make up our future and our future bodies. And now here is the Buddha pretty much saying the same thing. Something for us to heed very carefully. So I'm going to repeat this. All that we are is the result of what we have thought. All that we are is founded on our thoughts and formed by our thoughts. In general, I think people pay very little attention to their thoughts. You know, intellectually we know it's important to pay attention to our thoughts, and our thoughts become things, and we know that very well known axiom, energy follows thought. Are we living it? Have we put it into, our day-to-day lives? I think not. From what I'm seeing and hearing and observing, it's still in the brain. We have the information, we have the knowledge, but are we actually living it? Because our thoughts are what is building our future existence. So do we really believe this? When we find ourselves immersed in negativity, immersed in fear, immersed in criticism, immersed in anger, immersed in crises, do we still pay attention to our thoughts? And are we realizing that, in fact, indeed, energy follows thought? Here's an example. Whatever we are now is the result of what we thought in previous lives. That opens this idea, into a wider door of understanding. The nice thing is it's never too late. So we can begin to think about what we want to be in our future lives, from how we want to look, how we want to think, where we want to live, how we want to live, what we want our life to become. Do you want to be a mathematician? Do you want to be a physicist? Do you want to be a politician? In today's world, I think the general consensus is no, I don't want to be a politician. On the other hand, being a politician is so vital to the future of the planet, so vital to the future of the citizens of each country and the world. So if we want to be a politician, we have to prepare ourselves, through ethics and right living and honesty, and being aware that when we're a teenager, that history may come back and walk in the front door when we run for office, as we're finding out in politics today. In the Tibetan's teaching, we are told that eventually only third-degree initiates will be heads of state. We haven't reached that point yet. I've thought about this a lot, actually, and the reality is that humanity must be ready for third-degree initiates. So, for a third-degree initiate to step into a powerful office and exercise this powerful decision-making possibility, humanity must be ready in their consciousness to recognize the importance of decisions that will affect, their future, not just their next day life. And how these decisions must be inclusive of the planet, of the world, of humanity, and not just my family, for example. So humanity must be ready for third-degree initiates who are in touch with the plan. Third-degree initiates are in touch with the plan for humanity and that changing plan. The future refers to what we are going to be on the path of our divine destiny. So when the esotericist thinks about future, this is how we want to think. What we are going to be on the path of our future destiny. On this path, we had a past. That past now is very remote and it's lost, as the teaching says, in the darkness of eternity. We also had the future, which is also lost in the light of infinity. Isn't that interesting? We have come a long way, seeing things that we did not see before, but we're only just starting to see things now as human emotions and human thoughts and even the human aura. So when we use the word see, we're not just talking about the physical eyes, but we're talking about the five senses, and not just the five physical senses, but the higher senses. As our consciousness moves into the higher mind and into the spiritual triad, our senses expand and increase. We know this to be true because we have way showers that have developed these higher senses. I always think of Nicholas Rourke and his painting in regard to higher senses. Some people will only see the physical form of this great master artist's painting. But those who have developed their higher senses will see into the depth of these paintings, and the first thing you recognize is this is an active painting. It's like a video. You can see movement taking place in these paintings. You can see activity in these paintings that the normal functioning eye cannot see. That's because your senses are now expanding and you're able to see things that the normal eye cannot see. So we have come a long way from Neanderthal man to where we are today. Seeing the human aura. Most of us can see glimpses of the aura, but how many of us can continuously see the aura of a human being, the aura of your pet, the aura of a tree, the aura of a mountain, the aura of great ones? That's what we want to develop for our future. Can you see the effects of a word going from your mouth out into space? Wouldn't that be amazing? Well, it happens. Some clairvoyants say that every word we utter creates a geometrical figure. And then this geometrical figure changes into a color. When it goes from the etheric level to the astral plane, we're told it becomes a mathematical symbol. When it goes from the etheric level to the astral plane, it becomes a mathematical symbol. And then on the mental plane, it turns into words. Again, isn't that interesting? In higher planes, it plays the colors of music. So it gives us a little idea of, let's take the voice, the human voice. We can start out with the human voice. Some human voices are so beautiful, we just are mesmerized. We love to listen to that human voice. Other human voices are so irritating. You know, we can't handle more than a few minutes without wanting to walk away, or we become irritated. Now imagine the words coming from a beautiful human voice, and that voice going out into space, and how it's turning into a mathematical symbol, and then a word, and then a color that becomes musical. And then just the opposite, when you take that irritating voice that becomes a mathematical symbol, that becomes a word, that becomes a color and music. It's a destructive force versus that beautiful melodious voice becoming a constructive force. So pay attention to the effect the human voice has on you. That person, the other person. It will tell you a lot about the consciousness of that individual. A great sage, speaking about speech, says that devas do not hear. Devas do not hear, but they see the colors of our emotions and the colors of our thoughts. The teaching explains that the future is a state of human awakening. So there's another definition of future, that the future is a state of human awakening. That most of us, what we are doing here now on the earth is nothing else but sleeping in our physical body. That very few people are awakened. That very few people can see. Just to clarify, we're not talking about lower psychism, or I'm not talking about lower psychism here. You know, your cats are probably more psychic than you are, if we're talking about lower psychism. Our dogs can hear better than we can hear. So, what does that tell us? That our animals are lesser evolved, but in that lesser evolution, there was a time and point that we were there too, where we had the psychic ability to sense things that we cannot as human beings sense today. They can see things and hear things that we cannot see and hear today. It's like we're told a dog has senses, hearing senses so keen that they can hear these high-pitched notes, tonalities that we cannot hear. But that's still lower psychism, you know, for our animals, and they need to have this. This instinctive lower psychism is what protects them. So let's say that our dogs are not domesticated yet and they're out in the wilds. They need to hear sounds that are a mile, 2, 3 miles away so they can protect themselves. And the same thing for our cats. So these senses now for the human being, our physical senses have served us well for the last 18 million years. But as we evolve, we want to increase our sensitivities so that we begin to recognize there is more to life than what is physical, more to life than what is dense physical matter. That requires a change of consciousness. That requires an awakening so that more people, more and more and more people can see through their higher psychic abilities, not through the abilities their dogs and cats have. There are many things waiting for us in the future. Here's a quote from Fiery World, Volume 1, paragraph 241. It says, "We prepare during earthly existence the future beautiful gardens. Thought in all its constructiveness, thought, in all its constructiveness creates our own future happiness." It's simple to say these words. You know, we don't have to look these words up in the dictionary like we did yesterday, the esoteric dictionary. We know what these words mean, but are we taking them to task? And it goes on to say, "Thus we proceed by means of thought beyond the limits of earth." We don't want to be in the same place as our kitties and dogs. You know, it's fun. I mean, it's wonderful when it's exciting when we see this instinctive behavior from our pets, you know, from our cats and dogs, and that's the only kind of pets I've ever had. I've never had a snake as a pet, or there's those little long, what are those animals? Yeah, ferret, right? Thank you. It sounds like so I don't really know about them, but it's fun, and we kind of rely on our animals to have that instinct. So why do we not have higher senses built? Anyway, so this verse means that we are preparing our future now, at this moment. With whatever we are doing at this moment in life, we are building our future. I've observed that busy people pay very little attention to their thoughts, but it is their thoughts that are building their future existence. It is very important that we control our future. Hey, now we can use that word control in a positive way. It's important that we control our future. In what way? By living in a way that will lead us to our future. For example, if you want to have a great mind in the future, you must work on your mind now. If you want to have a healthy mind, you must think healthy thoughts. If you want to have a beautiful physical body, you must perform only those actions, emotions, and mental activities that are in harmony with each other. The emotions must be in harmony with our thoughts, with our actions, with our feelings, with our expressions. Such harmony will create a harmonious body in the future. Now, here's a story. I was talking a little earlier to a co-worker saying, you know, your husband would be great to read this story because he has many voices. but I didn't think about it in time. So bear with me. Anyway, this is an old Cherokee Indian story, and it's about the mind and the future. Imagine this story taking place with a family that lives in Arkansas, in the back countries of Arkansas, and I'm going to try to read it the way it's written. Once in the late afternoon, me and old Maud were sitting with our backs against the sweet gum and watching when I saw a flicker of something move a ways off. It was Grandma. She had passed not far from us, but I figured she hadn't seen my secret place at all, or she would have said something. Grandma could move quieter than a whisper through the wood leaves. I followed her, and she was root gathering. I caught up to help, and me and Grandma sat down on a log to sort the roots out. I was too young to keep a secret, for I had to tell Grandma about my place. She wasn't surprised, which surprised me. Grandma said all Cherokees had a secret place. She told me she had one, and Grandpa had one too. She said she had never asked, but she believed Grandpa's was on top of the mountain on the high trail. She said she reckoned most everybody had a secret place, but she couldn't be certain because she never made inquiries about it. But Grandma said it was necessary to have these secret places, so that made me feel right good about having one. Grandma said, everybody has two minds. One of the minds has to do with the necessaries for body living. You had to use it to figure out how to get shelter and eating and such like for the body. She said we had to have that mind so that we could carry on. But she said we had another mind that had nothing to do with such. She said it was the spirit mind. Grandma said if you used the body living mind to think greedy or mean, you was always cutting off at folks with it and figuring out how to materially profit often them. Then you could shrink up your spirit mind to a size no bigger than a hickory nut. Grandma said that when your body died, the body living mind died with it. And if that's the way you had thought all your life, there you was, stuck with a higher nut or hickory nut spirit. As the spirit mind was all that lived when everything else died. Then Grandma said, when you was born back as you was bound to be, then there you was, born with a hickory nut spirit mind that had no practical, no understanding of anything. Then it might shrink up to the size of a pea and could disappear. If the body living mind took over in total, in such case, you lose your spirit complete. So that's the story. So simple, isn't it? Cherokee Indian telling a grandma telling her little grandson about that. In esoteric literature, man is symbolized by a flower. A person radiates fiery flowers in their aura. Think of the chakras, right? For example, we are told that when a person is unfolding spiritually, their head center looks like a lotus. Can you imagine Can you imagine that? If we were truly and totally awakened, we could see whose head centers were open. And that lotus, and how fully bloomed, or in the state of bud, it was in existence, or is in existence. Another golden flower appears near the shoulder blades, another one on the throat, and another between our eyebrows. These etheric centers are like flowers, and thus the Master says man is symbolized by a flower. When a person is really developed, which means flourishing and blooming, they are like a beautiful blooming tree. We know that artists try to portray the great ones like Christ by having that light, around their head and radiating out. But they haven't yet visually, psychically been able to see those blooming flowers. That will be our future. When you have 200 blooming trees, then you have a garden. This is what Master M means when he says that thoughts build the future. If your thoughts are really low quality, anger, hatred, greed, jealousy, which is so predominant in mankind's thinking today, we are going to be a low quality person. Now, the common person hearing this is going to be angry. How can you say these things? We don't have to say them, we see them. It's not whether you have $1 million tower named after yourself. You can still be a low quality person. If your thoughts are very high quality, then you are going to be a great creative genius, because that is what you worked for. Whatever you give to nature, nature gives back to you. So some of you, talk about service, and you want to be engaged in service, and yet it may be your health is not accommodating you to engage in an active service the way you did when you were in your 20s, 30s, and 40s. But you can engage in this kind of service by watching your thoughts. All of humanity, imagine if all of humanity were so conscious of their thoughts, positive versus negative, how quickly humanity would advance. As humanity advances, it will draw more sages into the planet today, more great ones into the planet today to lead us into the future. But if we are still, as a humanity, engaged only in low-level thoughts, these great ones will not come to the planet because we're not ready for them yet. Christ once said that if you plant a fig tree, don't expect cherries from that tree. If you plant a fig tree, you are going to harvest figs from it. If you plant a cherry tree, you will harvest cherries. If you plant, in other words, creative, high-level, beautiful thoughts, you are going to reap a beautiful life and happiness. If you are living a double or triple life with your thoughts and expressions, you are really doing what? You're creating chaos. One day you love, the next day you hate. One day this is your best friend, tomorrow they're your greatest enemy. That's chaos. When this chaos penetrates our subtle bodies, our mental, emotional, etheric, and physical centers, we find ourselves in a very unhealthy condition. Can you imagine in the public school system today starting our first graders out with this philosophy, with this teaching? We would no longer, as parents, dread the teenage years. So, some of you who may be on that strong love, wisdom ray, which is the ray of education, maybe you're going to be one of those people in the future that will become a teacher of first graders and will have a school system that will allow things like this to be taught. See, even in the charter schools, private schools, things like this are not being taught yet. There's our future. We just planted a beautiful thought and have released it into space. And maybe one of us here in our next life will be one of those teachers. We may blame everything else and everyone else except ourselves. But we are the only ones to be blamed because we created that chaos. All that we are is a result of what we have thought. From thought comes action. And I'm just going to repeat this again because I don't know of anybody in our group or in the esoteric community that doesn't know this. But they're not living it. They're forgetting it. They say, I have this in my brain. You don't have to tell me. I already know this. Why aren't you living it? So now we have the knowledge. Now we have to live it. All that we are is a result of what we have thought. And from thought comes action. Try to guard your thoughts. Immediately when you start to think of something ugly, try to stop thinking that way. With your negative thoughts, we create a stagnant pool and then sit in it, and then we drink from it. So we want to always check our thoughts and see if they are pure. If you have a family that thinks like this, you're going to have a beautiful, healthy family. So, as parents, as grandparents, as godparents, we have to try to find a way to get our family to hear us. Hey, what we have working against us, in my opinion, is education. Hey, education today is all about profit, all about building that beautiful home, all about having the Lexus, all about, graduating from college so you can have a leadership role to make more money. It's not conducive, to think like this. So when we try to teach our grandchildren or our teenagers or even our adult children about negative thinking and the damage that it does to the family, they say, okay, this is mom, we'll have to tolerate her. Oh, this is grandma, she's on her way out, she doesn't think clearly anyway. And unfortunately, this is the norm. But we're going to stick with it because you never know what kind of, these seeds that we are planting, you never know when they're going to take root and blossom in our family and with our friends. When Christ was asked who would enter the kingdom of God, he said, bring that little child to me. If you will be like this child, you will enter the kingdom of God. We must be pure like that innocent, happy, beautiful child. This is why I advocated a few weeks ago that if you can find a picture of yourself when you were like 2 or 3 or 4 years old and you were so happy, I mean, nothing deterred you. You were just that happy little kid out there playing in the dirt, you know, or playing with your puppy, or just thinking about what tomorrow was going to bring. And you saw birds and you actually had time to sit down and look at them and look at their beauty and their colors and smell the flowers, and you know, you weren't concerned about your bank account, you know, or how you're going to have to buy a new car because next year it's going to be too old, the warranty has run out, and so on and so forth. You didn't care about those things. Not when you were that young. It is our good thoughts, which is the ship that travels toward the stars of our future. Our thought conditions our future, not only on the earth, but beyond it. See, this is advanced thinking. This is the mystery teachings that we all began to hunger for and look for and try to find answers to these questions. And now we have the answers. Our thought conditions our future, not only on the earth, but beyond it. So we're talking about astral plane. We're talking about the lower mental plane. But we're also talking about the higher mental plane. When we read, like the book Other Worlds by Torquem Serderian, sometimes when I've read those chapters, I thought, oh my gosh, do I really want to know these things? Now I've grown up a little bit more, I've matured a little bit more. Yeah, I do. I need to know these things. Because if we pass on with negative, ugly, hateful, critical thoughts, it keeps us in the lower worlds. And who wants to stay in the lower worlds? It's like living on the planet, at least in today's society. So, this is so important right now to be aware of our thinking. When we see the whole objective manifestation with all the galaxies and constellations and stars, from the viewpoint of infinity, it is like a little flower fallen into the ocean of space. We are not limited to physical manifestation. We have different manifestations. We have emotional, mental, we have intuitional, atmic, monadic, divine, and cosmic manifestations. Listen to this. Thoughts are like arrows taking us toward the future. Okay, so let's say that we have a serious disease. We have a choice of that disease controlling our thought process, or, you know, in a most negative way, or we can say, thanks God. Thanks be to God, because karma is now being paid. And my future, in my future life, I'm going to be so healthy. I can live to 100 years old and never have to see a doctor, because this situation right now is preparing my future. It's it's clearing the decks of physical karma. So we suffer a little bit because we're still so attached to our physical body. I remember a friend of mine many years ago, and she has passed since. This was about 10 years before she died. And she began preparing for her next life. It was so significant. It had such a huge impact on me. And I knew when she passed, she was ready. Because she had been preparing for her next incarnation for 10 years. Before that first year of the 10 years, she was ready to die. She was old. She didn't have much energy. She didn't have much enthusiasm. But she woke up and said, I still have some time. I don't have to give in, to, what do they call it, I can't think of the word, the statistics that, back in her day, that she would die between 65 and 70. So she lived to 85 years old. And her next life, she will come back very healthy. Thoughts are like arrows taking us toward the future. They form our rocket which pulls us away from the earth. Master M says that the greatest antitoxin is a pure thought. He says that pure thought can cure many sicknesses. So the doctor loads us up with really heavy medication. We can't think clearly. So we need to be careful. We need to take the meds that are necessary, but try not to take medication that alters your brain. Try not to. Because our thoughts become, I don't want to go too much into this, but our thoughts become possessed by other entities. In the Bhagavad Gita, there's so much I could say about this, but we don't have much time left. In the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna said to Krishna, "My Lord, to control the mind is as difficult as to control the wind." Krishna answers, "Yes, it is difficult, but by effort it is possible. You must tell yourself, because others did this, I can too." This is how we are challenged to surpass ourselves. We must face ourselves. We must see the effects of our deeds, but we do not learn from them. The most important factor in the process of improving ourselves is to see our motives, to really see our motives and to change them. People often see the effects of their bad deeds, but they enjoy seeing them sometimes. But when they begin to see the thoughts behind their actions and the motives behind their thoughts, they may then change the level of their consciousness. As their consciousness expands, they correct their motives. A motive, what is a motive? A motive is a motivating force within our mind. A motive is a motivating force within our mind. Now, sometimes a motive is a fear. It is a glamour or a blind urge based on past suffering or obsessions. Seeing our motive, a fear, a glamour, a blind urge, can reveal to us the cause of our activities and clear them up. It is after such a cleansing process that we can contact the real motivating urges within us. These real motivating urges are energies of our soul, which are ready to radiate and to create. This is done by an esoteric method we have talked about at length and written about at length, which is called observation. Observation is when the observer gradually withdraws himself into higher levels and touches the motivating forces within themselves. Once they contact them and replace them with real motives, they meet themselves, which is to meet the self, the capital S self, which is the highest motivating power within us. So let me close with this. It is about our birth from the viewpoint of the teachings. In the book, Agni Yoga book, Fiery World 1, paragraph 241, it says, one can foresee how in the course of time an astrochemical basis for many manifestations will be found, and each record of them will be of great service to the future. At the time you were born, for example, what kind of chemistry was affecting your nervous system, your etheric body, your mental body? Astrochemistry is the combination of energies and forces that are pouring down into our solar system, into our planet, and conditioning the manifestation of culture and civilization. All that we are and all that we do is the effect of our responses or reactions to these forces and energies. Later, we will know how to utilize these energies to further our evolution toward greater dimension. So go back when you were born and see what was going on. And you can see some of the energies through your chart, your astrological chart. At the exact time when a baby is born, that little one is in the most impressionable state. Energies and forces coming from constellations, planets, and even comets leave a great impression on the electromagnetic field of his or her body. And this can have a decisive effect on their life. The mixture of these energies and forces creates the astrochemistry to which the teaching is referring to. Energies are impersonal. We have to remember that. Energies are impersonal. It is the level and depth of our responses that condition the effects of energy. Also, the different combinations of energies and forces creates different types of forms through which the consciousness functions. As the elements combine with different elements or in different quantities produce different chemicals. All this can be seen in your astrological chart, particularly from the time your soul was born, which is a different chart. So it is with the combination of energies and forces. This is the foundation of the science of astrology, if it is taken as the science of energies.